Our next speaker is Adam Marblestone, who is a Schmidt Futures Innovation Fellow. He's a former research scientist at Google DeepMind. He works on connections between AI and neuroscience. And I will just say that writing a paper with him called Atoms of Neural Computation, which was in Science in 2014, was one of the most stimulating projects of my career. I welcome Adam Marblestone.
Thank you, Gary. It was one of mine too. It was around the holidays, around 2014. I recall if we were working on that. So I would describe myself as a maximalist in terms of ways that I think neuroscience and cognitive science can impact AI. So I don't intend what I say to be exclusionary to any of what anyone else is saying here. And I also think that this is only part of the picture, and that computer science and pure AI approaches also have a lot to say. But what I want to do in this talk is just highlight one area of neuroscience that I think may be emerging to have the potential to impact AI, but has so far been kind of neglected for both for lack of data and just because there's been very few papers actually trying this. So the conventional perspective, if you will, if I can call it that, on how neuroscience would inform AI is this idea of getting mechanistic insight from neuroscience. And this, I think, is reflected in the last talk on feedback and the face patch system. But the basic idea is make observations of the brain, try to abstract that to a theory of functioning of different circuits in the brain and how they work. Right now, we're at a fairly primitive ability to do this. So we have many different theories, even looking at the same cortical microcircuit structure, which is only now partially being understood or even measured. That same theory, that same data, such as we understand it now, can map onto, depending on who you ask, a number of different ideas: graphical models, biological implementations of backpropagation, what Gary and I were writing about is sort of modular, reconfigurable circuits, or some people maybe think that it's actually not. It's hopeless to actually figure this out. So there are a number of possibilities. I think as we get deeper data about this, they will start to make more unique predictions that will be more falsifiable. But what I want to do is connect this back from this kind of mechanistic neuroscience view to something that maybe connects more directly to how deep learning researchers think today and conduct research today. So with a few exceptions, I would say in deep learning research, many of the impressive kind of real world examples like image classification or rich natural language, they come from using big human derived data, basically copying human behavior, whether that be copying humans' choices as far as classifying images or copying the utterance statistics of natural language in something like GPT-3. And recently, in some cool papers from DeepMind, for example, copying or doing what's called behavioral cloning on interactions between humans as one human is teaching another human to interact in an embodied setting. All of these rely on human behavioral data as a key component of the training. There are some exceptions now where you don't rely on any human data, where you're trying to bootstrap entirely using reinforcement learning. Amazing one in Nature this week, where they're doing model-based reinforcement learning with a learned model on Atari. That's an amazing example where it doesn't really use human data. But what I want to suggest is that there is an aspect of neuroscience that hasn't been used as a source of data for directly using that as a supervision signal or training signal, and that is the actual brain activity itself. So what's shown on the right here is from now almost 10 years ago, Jack Gallant's lab at Berkeley taking fMRI activity patterns in the human brain and using that to decode what image the person is looking at. That's a big, expensive MRI machine. Meanwhile, there have been developments in making brain activity scanning in humans much more accessible, portable, cheap. What if we could actually directly use the human brain activity as a teaching signal, where we say, when I look at an image, not only do I match how that person classifies the image, is it a dog or is it a cat? But I actually directly try to make the AI predict the full activity pattern in that person's brain. Could that be used as a source of dense teaching signal coming from neuroscience? And there's only a handful of papers about this, but I'll point you to one from David Cox's group, where they were using human brain activity to guide image classification algorithms. So thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Adam. Our next